and energy as well. Thank you for that. Good comments.
We need more data, guys.
Senator Murkowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I appreciate the opportunity for a second round here. I mentioned critical minerals. I'd like to ask you a little bit more about geothermal, because as we think about these areas of opportunity, there's a lot of focus on wind and solar, and I don't mean to be pointing to my friend from Colorado there, but geothermal is kind of like, it's the mature technology because it's been around for a while, but the technologies that are being used nowadays are not necessarily what we have seen in the past. You have had an interest in this, business interest, and I'm a little bit excited to know what you think the potential is for you in this new role at DOE to help accelerate more in the geothermal development space and reduce some of the project uncertainty. So I'm looking for better assurance for some of those bright people who have these crazy wild ideas that we can do things on ADAC and on Alaska and out on Mount Spur to try to reduce these barriers to entry in an energy area that's been around for a long time. This should not be so hard. What can we do? And are you excited about it from a DOE perspective?
Very much so. Very much so. Look, I'm uprooting my life and moving to Washington, D.C. if I get the honor and privilege of being confirmed, because I love energy, all kinds of energy for all Americans. And I love that you highlight geothermal, just tremendous potential energy source. I worked on this 30-some years ago and wrote some papers about it, and a new idea called hot, dry rock, where geothermal today is where there's hot rocks approachable, they have fractures in them so fluid can flow, and they're full of water. Well, that's a small set of the microcosm, but anywhere we drill, right here, we drill 3 miles underground, it's exceedingly hot. That energy is sitting there. So the idea of hot, dry rock is to inject water into a well, flow through that rock, and therefore take some of the heat out of that rock and make that water very hot, and then flow it up and produce electricity from it, produce heating for homes or houses. It's just an enormous, abundant energy resource below everyone's feet.
Can I interrupt you and just ask you to save that energy and passion for when you are confirmed as Secretary of Energy and elevate this within the department? I know everybody wants to get to the top of the list, but if I can express disappointment with what I have seen within the Department of Energy over the years, we've seen great things in great areas, and geothermal just kind of sits back there as kind of the forgotten child. And we're not going to allow that to happen. So I appreciate that passion. Let me ask you about Alaska's natural gas. You've talked a lot about how we've really seen this revolution when it comes to being able to access our natural gas through the fracking. You know Alaska, you've been up there, you know our issues. Congress has approved a loan guarantee for an Alaska gas line, and I would just ask for your support, if confirmed, that you're going to work with the delegation to help stand up the loan guarantee through regulations, whatever may be necessary to ensure that DOE can actually accept the application when the project proponents are ready. It should be an easy answer.
Yeah, Senator, tremendous resources in Alaska of oil, natural gas, minerals, mining, logging, geothermal. You've got it all. You've got it all. And to grow natural gas production in Alaska and build infrastructure to export that to the world, given how close it is to the biggest, fastest growing markets in the world in Asia, I think is a tremendous idea. Well, great for our country, great for Alaska, and I'm confident that President-elect Trump will be a champion of these ideas of growing American energy production and influence in the world.
Well, we've got it, as you mentioned. We have it, and we're ready, willing. We just need good partners at the federal level to help us advance this. And last point on that, we have seen some really critical energy investments in Alaska as a result of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. A lot of folks on this committee helped with that, but the DOE programs that are funded by IJA have provided a lot of benefit to Alaska projects so far. Most of them are already underway. They range for everything from the rural renewable energy investments, carbon storage, transmission upgrades is huge, demonstration of long duration storage. So I just want your assurance that we're going to still be able to continue these projects as a priority within DOE. What we have started, we don't want to have a drop-off here. We want to have a smooth transition for these existing DOE projects to be able to continue to allow us to build out that infrastructure, that transmission capacity that's gonna allow for a betterment of Alaskans and really our opportunity to help Americans.
I'm thrilled to see the breadth of energy innovation in Alaska and would love to see that continue and expect that it will continue.
Are you going to come up and visit?
Absolutely.
I figured it didn't take much of an invitation. I appreciate the fact that you've got ties to the area already, and I appreciate that. But thank you for your willingness to give the committee this much time. I know that you've got a lot more energy, but I think that your grandson is probably bored with us, so might be time to end, Mr. Chairman.
I think his grandson seems riveted, actually. Before we go to Senator Hickenlooper, I'll note that love the Geothermal.
Mr. President.
The senator from Alaska.
Mr. President, I join my colleague from Utah, the chairman of the Energy Committee, in speaking today in clear opposition to the Senate Joint Resolution 10, which would terminate the energy emergency that has been declared by President Trump. I think my colleagues here on both sides of the aisle know that I'm not afraid to suggest when I think the president may be heading in the wrong direction. But folks, on this one, he has absolutely, positively, clearly hit the mark. And I think that the chairman of the Energy Committee has outlined in pretty good detail how that has come about. We know that our country is blessed with extraordinary assets. We have the potential to become the world's leading resource superpower. But in order to do that, we have to be able to produce more energy domestically. And that means we have to be able to extract more minerals. We have to be able to build more transmission lines. We need to be able to overhaul what is clearly a broken federal permitting process. And we can do this. We can do this in a way that is cheaper, that is more reliable, more clean, really, than any other nation in the world. But we've got to kind of dig out now from where we have been over these past 4 years, where we saw setback after setback for resource-producing states like mine, the state of Alaska. Let me give you a little detail in terms of what we're facing in the state of Alaska, a state that, again, is known for its resource wealth. But right now, in the south central part of the state, we're on the verge of importing LNG to meet the needs of some 75% of our population during the colder winter months. I'll just repeat that. Alaska, the place where everybody knows we've got extraordinary oil resources. We have extraordinary natural gas potential, not only in the North Slope, but down in Cook Inlet. Well, Cook Inlet reserves are on the decline, and we are actually talking about importing LNG from Canada. That ought to just be considered a non-starter for anyone who knows and understands the extraordinary potential for resource development that we have in our state with the wealth that we have. Right now, in some of our remote communities across the state, residents are truly in what I would describe as an energy emergency. They might not use that term anymore because they've just gotten so used to the fact that they're paying so much to keep their lights on and to keep warm. We have residents in many communities that are spending up to 1/2 of their incomes on energy, just to, again, to keep the lights on and to keep warm. Think about what that means when you're spending half of what you make for just the basic necessities. It means that you have less to feed your family, to educate your kids. We've got communities where power costs 10 times the national average, where gasoline can easily exceed $10 a gallon, and that includes diesel as well. And those costs, of course, impact everything, because you've got to move your food, your goods, usually by airplane, sometimes over the water, sometimes you're able to drive it. But when you're paying this much for diesel, for gasoline, for avgas, it impacts everything. So it's not unusual to go into a village store, and if you can find a gallon of milk, see that it costs $18 a gallon. I do my comparison shopping by checking the prices of a box of Tide. People need to be able to wash their clothing, to just for sanitary purposes. You can almost in every village that I'm going to, you're looking at prices over $50 a box, $50 for a box of Tide laundry detergent. And it's not because Tide is any more expensive than anything else. It's just the reality of what we're paying there. So I think we've got an energy emergency when it comes to affordability. Right now, in our state, we also have an oil pipeline that is just 1/4 filled. We've had this pipeline been pumping oil safely from the North Slope to delivery down in Valdez, going to other parts of the country for refining. That oil pipeline was completed in 1974 and has been producing for America ever since. But right now, it's about 1/4 full. That pipeline starts in, again, one of the most geologically prospective regions on the Earth. But what's happening is you have had federal government controls that surrounds most of the lands there, and it has led to decreased opportunities to expand production up there, and a pipeline that, again, about 1/4 full. I mentioned the benefits of oil here. I talked about natural gas, but we also have known deposits of about 50 critical minerals, the building blocks of our modern society and our national security. We have just about everything that our nation needs to break its deep dependence on China, to be able to rebuild our supply chains. But if you can't access it, you can't produce it, and we can't benefit from it. When we try to build a road from the Dalton Highway to the Ambler Mining District, this is explicitly provided by a 1980 federal law. We did this as part of a grand compromise. The road corridor was in exchange for a creation of a massive national park and preserve. But we can get that project approved in one administration, only to have the next one come in, reopen it, ignore the law, and then make a political decision to reject it. And then, here in Congress, we run into a partisan wall with some less interested in the rule of law than the whims of the very same environmental groups that pushed this resolution. And then meanwhile, what's happening when we're not able to produce in our own home states? Meanwhile, China's cutting us off from its mineral exports, including the gallium and the germanium that we could produce from the Ambler District if only the federal government would uphold its promise to allow Alaskans to responsibly access it. So yeah, when I look at my home state, when I look at Alaska, I do see an energy emergency. I see several, actually. And I see even more reasons to be concerned nationally. As the chairman of the Energy Committee just noted, electricity demand is growing, and yet we can't permit new power plants or build transmission lines. We can't build pipelines in the Northeast or almost anything, particularly mines, on federal lands in the West. And, you know, I I guess I'm listening to some of the arguments that are being presented here, and maybe I'd feel differently if my home state was producing more than 2 million barrels of oil per day, as some are. But we're not, and it's not because we can't, it's because we've been denied the opportunity to do so. And that's why I'm very thankful for President Trump and the administration for the focus that they have given to the state of Alaska with a specific executive order to allow us to unleash Alaska's energy and resource potential. I have shared with the Secretary of Interior, as well as the Secretary of Energy, that we need to stop treating energy like it's some kind of an evil or a bad thing. We need to recognize that it is good. When I was chairman of the Energy Committee, we had a little bumper sticker, and I summed up my whole policy with, energy is good. I haven't deviated from that policy. Energy makes us stronger, makes us less vulnerable, and it is an asset, not a liability, like we have seen it treated as such. We need to be unleashing our resources, including all of our renewables, because that's all part of the energy basket as well. So it's not an either or, in my view. It's all of the above. And that's good for our economy, it's good for our security, it's good for our geopolitical power. America's resource production is good for the global environment because when we're producing our resources, we stop paying countries that have little to no environmental standards, no interest in reducing their emissions, and who often rely on child or slave labor, and who frankly don't even like us. So why not seize the opportunities that we have here, benefit our own people, our own economies, and again, benefit the global environment as well. So if an energy emergency helps us figure this all out, then I'm good with that. And if it helps us take the federal sanctions that we have seen placed on Alaska and return my state to the heart of our national strategy for resource production, then that is also good. I think we'll all be better off. With that, Mr. President, I yield the floor.
Senator from Alaska.
Mr. President, I'm scheduled to be part of a colloquy here in just a couple minutes, but I wanted to make a comment about what the senator from Washington has shared. And I'm going to use a term that maybe some people are not familiar with. We are in a Morton's fork. Morton's fork. We've heard about fork in the road. Some people know what a Hobson's choice is. But a Morton's fork is a choice between two equally unpleasant alternatives. And if this isn't where we are right now, ladies and gentlemen, I don't know what is. As Senator Murray has outlined, a long-term CR, when we have already done our appropriations work and we're not able to get to that work, instead, we basically give the administration the ability to direct within the funding levels, but direct as they will see fit through the end of September, is something that I think many of us, certainly this appropriator, doesn't really feel comfortable with. I spent a lot of time within my appropriations subcommittee working very hard in the Department of Interior to make sure that we knew whether it was funding for wildland firefighters or what we were doing within BIA or within any of the other agencies, that we did what people asked and expected us to do. We did those bills, and I think we did a pretty good job. Mine moved out of full committee unanimously. And then they didn't advance. And so here we are sitting at a place where we have to take either the choice of a long-term CR and basically give up the work that we have done as a Congress, or we move to a government shutdown, an equally untenable, an equally unpleasant alternative, and one that, quite honestly, we should not be in this position. We should not be in this place where we have two bad choices for our government, for the people of this country. We can do better. I agree, Senator Murray, I wish that what we were able to advance is a short-term CR that would allow us to move to finish up our appropriations bills, do our work, and then start moving on FY26. I don't know whether it's possible between now and the end of day on March 14th, but I, for one, am at a place where I'm just beside myself that we are in a place where we feel that we have no good alternatives. We are in a Morton's fork. Mr. President, yesterday was a day that really captured the attention of the world. We've all been talking about tariffs for a little bit, but yesterday was the day that really brought the focus to what was going on here in the United States. At 12:01 in the morning on Wednesday, President Trump's tariffs on the countries with which the United States has had the largest trade deficits went into effect, on top of the 10% tariff rates that had previously applied to all countries, which had been initiated on Saturday, April 5th. And then just hours later yesterday afternoon, the President announced a 90-day pause and lowered reciprocal tariffs to then 10%, and at the same time announced that he was raising tariffs on China to 125%. Now today it looks like that number is closer to 145%. So to say that this has been a dizzying week in Washington, D.C. is probably an understatement. Those of us that are following the markets, it has been, again, it's been somewhat head-spinning. And I'm not going to comment here on the floor today about the negotiating tactics of President Trump. I think he is legendary and really world-renowned for his skills at that, his skills in bringing nations to the table. We're seeing some of this play out literally as we speak. Other countries that have approached the administration to have discussions about tariffs. This is a unique kind of leverage, most certainly, keeping those across the table off balance, but bringing the world potentially to the brink of a ruinous trade war certainly qualifies as a very unique point of leverage. The effort to try to reshore manufacturing here in this country is important, it's admirable, and it's something that we should all be working towards. But I think there has been general agreement that the message from the administration has been decidedly mixed, which leads to further confusion among our trading partner and our allies. If nobody understands where the finish line is, it's hard to reach it. I don't want to focus my comments here this afternoon about these possible strategies and end results of these policies so much, but I want to focus more on the process of how these tariffs were imposed, because I believe it is yet another example of Congress choosing to cede its powers to the executive branch. And if the global implications of these tariffs have shown us nothing else, it's that measures that are as important as these should be considered by the 535 elected individuals that are in tune with the American people, rather than vesting that with just one individual acting unilaterally. It's under Article 1, Section 8 of our United States Constitution that clearly enumerates that Congress shall have the power to lay and collect taxes, duties, imposts, and excises. In other words, the power to levy tariffs rests with us here in the Congress. So why have we seen the executive take control over tariff rates? And the answer lies in almost a centuries-long series of bills that we have seen here that Congress has voluntarily enacted and laid down its authority for the executive to pick up. Following the disastrous Smoot-Hawley Act of 1930, which plunged our nation deeper into a Great Depression, Congress passed the following legislation. First, it was the Reciprocal Trade Agreements Act of 1934, which authorized the President to make limited tariff rates without congressional review on top of negotiating bilateral reciprocal trade agreements. Then it was the Trade Expansion Act of 1962, which broadened the President's trade powers to include multilateral trade agreements, while also allowing the President to unilaterally impose tariffs if imports could threaten national security. Then the Trade Act of 1974, which allowed the President to protect U.S. workers by adjusting tariffs if foreign countries engaged in unfair trade practices. And then just a few years later, it was the International Emergency Economic Powers Act of 1977, which gives the President authorities to address declared emergencies if, quote, unusual and extraordinary, close quote, threats exist to national security, foreign policy, or to the economy. So those powers include, you probably guessed it, the authority to regulate or prohibit imports. So in his April 2nd executive order, President Trump declared a national emergency because of a lack of reciprocity in our bilateral trade relationships and our trading partners' economic policies that suppress domestic wages. He is authorized to do so under the National Emergencies Act of 1976. So I want to be clear about all of this. I know some people might not like it, but all of what he has done is clearly above board. The President is clearly within his powers to impose tariffs on our allies, like Mexico and Canada and the EU, just as much as he is with our adversaries, like China and Russia and Iran. And President Trump and President Biden before him took this route because Congress has largely relegated tariff authority to the President through the laws that effectively cede to the executive. And my friends, it's just one more example of Congress abdicating instead of legislating. In my time here, I've seen a troubling pattern in both bodies where the party that controls the White House seems all too comfortable relinquishing authority to the President and then rubber stamping whatever policies the executive wants enshrined into law. Both Democrats and Republicans in Congress have deferred to the executive to call the shots, in my view, for far too long. Now, we use the phrase around here a lot, co-equal branches of government. I use it all the time. But the reality is, Congress was created in Article 1. Article 1 of the Constitution. We're given far more authority than the executive. All you need to do is look in your handy-dandy little pocket Constitution. Ours is a lot longer. But look at the authorities that we have. Congress may impeach and remove a president and members of the judiciary. Congress can override a presidential veto of legislation. Congress appropriates the money that funds the operation of all branches of government. And it is Congress that, again, needs to lay and collect taxes, duties, imposts, and excises. So we also say a lot around here that business loves certainty. I would suggest that the country's entire tariff regime being subject to the whims of one individual lends anything but certainty. And that's why I have signed on to Senators Grassley and Senator Cantwell's legislation. They call it the Trade Review Act of 2025. And it would reclaim this branch's authority and duty to help manage tariffs as outlined in the U.S. Constitution. The bill requires notice to the Congress of the imposition of or increase in any tariffs, requires notice to the Congress in 48 hours, And with that congressional notification, it has to include an explanation of the president's reasoning for imposing or raising the tariffs, as well as providing an analysis of potential impact on American businesses and consumers. And I can tell you, the Alaskans that I'm talking to back home would really like the last part of this, an analysis of how's this going to impact us. And then another provision within the Grassley-Cantwell Act is within 60 days, Congress would pass a joint resolution of approval on the new tariff. Otherwise, all new tariffs on imports would expire after that deadline. So what this act effectively would do would be to reaffirm Congress's role with regards to tariff. It allows for a greater engagement, if you will, between the executive and the congressional branch, allows for the debate, allows for that engagement, allows for that understanding. So again, I'm hearing from folks all over back home because they're worried. We already pay high costs for just about everything in Alaska, but they're worried about what it's going to mean for groceries, for cars, for furniture, electronics, coffee. We had a visit with a group of high school students on the steps yesterday, and they were from all over the state. We had some from Ketchikan all the way out to King Cove and out in the YK Delta. And the first question from one of the 16-year-olds in that group was, can you tell me what's going on with tariffs? How is this going to impact us? And you know, I really appreciated that question from that 16-year-old who's paying attention to what's going on. He's got questions. He's here in Washington, D.C., and he's figuring he's going to get some answers from his senator. Alaskans are facing consequences. They kind of want to know that they have a voice in it, and their voice is us. It's their senator. It's their representative. That's our role here. Now, it's been suggested, and the president himself has issued a statement about this legislation. He's indicated that he does not support it and that he would veto it. That is absolutely within his power. But we also have powers. We also have powers here in Congress, and we need to assert them. And so I would hope that this bill is maybe just the start, maybe just the toe in the water here, where we're starting to see Congress reassert its authority. Because if we don't stand up for the institution, if we don't stand up for the legislative branch of our government by debating this issue and others, but holding votes, debating, let's debate this, let's have a vote on the Trade Review Act. Because if we just sit back, if we don't assert our authority, we've only got ourselves to blame when we don't like the direction that may be taken. The executive has slowly arrogated more and more power since the end of World War II, and it's dramatically accelerated post 9/11. But we here in Congress have stood by, and we've accepted it. We've said it's okay. I think it's time for Congress to reassert itself, whether it's on tariffs, whether it's on the power of appropriation, whether it's overseeing the bodies, the agencies that we as a body have authorized. So let's legislate. Let's remember our role is to legislate. We owe that to those that we represent as well as to this institution for the long-term good of the nation. And with that, Mr. President, I yield the floor. Thank you, Madam Chairman, and thank you for this very important hearing. I wish that I had been able to spend the full morning here. We've all been pulled in so many different corners, but just the few minutes that I've been here with colleagues and listening to the comments and the concerns, know that I feel like everybody's speaking to me and my family situation. I just told Senator Moran that when he mentioned the hopes and dreams of young researchers being dashed, he's talking about my nephew. I called him yesterday because it was his birthday. He's a junior at Marquette, and he says, I'm floored by what we're seeing. All I want to do is find the cure. And Senator Coons, he wants to help find a cure for ALS because of how that has touched our family. And when we talk about hope and what happens when you don't have hope, I can tell you, because the ALS community reaches out to me as one of their advocates here, as I know they do with you, Senator Coons, and they said when they see the news about what is happening, the lack of hope pushes them to the point where unfortunately many are thinking about further shortening their time. Because without hope, how do you get through each day knowing that you are incrementally on the decline? And so the significance of what we're talking about and the contributions that we see through NIH, through our federal entities, those who are getting up every single morning to focus on hard things to make that incremental difference. And then those who back them. I see some in the audience here today who are giving their time and their treasure for advocacy in Alzheimer's, in ALS. I guess I want to ask a specific question here. We're dealing with unprecedented hits to the NIH and to those who have given their all to be there for others. We do a good job, I think, of taking the opportunities in other research areas to better gain leverage with the advancements that we make. How can we do more, particularly at this really difficult time, to ensure that the coordination that we have between complementary research efforts, and I see this with ALS, where NIH is focusing on understanding the biology, DOD is looking at the early stage drug development, the FDA is doing clinical trials, so you've got a lot going that comes together. What more can and should we be doing? And with the funding constraints that we are looking at right now, how are these collaboration efforts being compromised? And I'll throw this out to either you, Dr. Parika, or Dr. Haller.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Just very quickly, that coordination is vital when you're trying to approach something like ALS, which has so many different facets. But I'll tell you right now that at this moment, I want to just put a real face on this. We keep stiff upper lips here, but the scientific community is in paralysis right now. It is in paralysis across the country, in every state. There are graduate students, there are scientists, there are senior scientists who, instead of thinking about the very problems you're talking about, are thinking about the next grant, they're thinking about the next 6 weeks. And so if I can put a little bit of urgency for this committee, it is not about the FY26 appropriations process, which is going to be really important, and you're going to see a skinny budget that will scare the heck out of all of us. It's about the obligation of funding right now and making sure that we actually see some stability. That word stability, Madam Chair, that you used is so important, and we have lost that right now. And there's paralysis that doesn't enable us to spend the time on thinking about the very good question you just asked.
Dr. Haller?
Thank you very much, Senator, for this very important question. Research is about stability and continuity, and I'll give you an example. We have recruited a wonderful, brilliant young researcher, Emily Spalding. She has been awarded for her PhD research on neuronal mechanisms. She's working on ALS. She's working in roundworms and understands how transporting molecules across neurons is important. Now, as a young researcher, she's driven by curiosity. She's driven by a desire to understand knowledge, to make contributions to understanding ALS and the disease. But at certain points of her career, she needs federal support. She needs this continuity. When you start as a young student, you need federal funding. When you embark on postdoctoral research, or in her case now waiting for the last 7 months, that her grant she has written, which is excellent and will be reviewed, and it hasn't been reviewed. So this stability, this is what we need now at the moment. And then later on, when she becomes an accomplished scientist and is pursuing bold ideas, then federal support is needed again. And as was already mentioned, young people, we train them when they discuss what to do with their lives and whether they want to pursue a career in biomedical science, this message of uncertainty is deleterious.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chairman. Director, good morning. This is a week that a lot of Alaskans are paying attention to. Monday was the day that we recognize the missing, murdered Indigenous women and Girls Awareness Day. I've just been going through the morning clips. Well, you've been testifying, of course, but this morning, and there's accounts in Anchorage and Juneau and Fairbanks and marches in Nome, all recounting very painful stories that families have endured of their family members that have gone missing. Law enforcement just was not present for a host of different reasons. You and I talked about this prior to your confirmation, and it's something that I have been working on for a period of years now. We've made some good progress under the first Trump administration. There was a focus called Operation Lady Justice, and now I'm pleased to see that we have this expanded to what you're calling Operation Not Forgotten, to look into unresolved violent crimes in Indian country, including cases involving missing, murdered Indigenous persons. I'm looking critically at the budget here and wondering if you can share with me how the budget request, or what we have of it at this point in time, will support this expansion of Operation Not Forgotten. I need to be able to give folks back home the comfort that they need to know that these cases that have gone cold for not just months and years, but decades, will not be dropped, that push for closure will continue. What can you share with me this morning?
Senator, I greatly appreciate you highlighting and being a champion of crimes on Indian country. And just this week, I was the first FBI director in U.S. history to sit down at the Department of Interior with the tribal leaders at the stat level. And I also met privately with the parents of Emily Pike, who was tragically butchered on a reservation in Arizona. And her parents asked me to find the remains, the remaining pieces of her body that have not been returned. She's a 14-year-old girl. She's still missing her arms. They only have her torso. What I told them, and what I hope you take back to Alaska and what the rest of the tribal community hears, is that every crime in this country will be treated equally. Those that happen on Indian country and those that are happening to Native Americans are just as horrific as are happening in the rest of the world, in the rest of America. We've already prioritized resources on our in our state-level task forces to address these matters, and I asked the staff to allow FBI agents onto the reservations on a more regular basis and engage with them directly. I also invited the community leaders to nominate a law enforcement officer from one of the tribal jurisdictions to sit with me at the Hoover Building in the FBI, so we have a direct engagement with the community. And so we are, just one highlight, I think in Wind River, we executed an operation that took down, I can't remember how many dozens of pounds of fentanyl that was heading to an Indian reservation. So you have my commitment that we will not forget it.
Well, thank you for that broader commitment. As you know, of course, we don't have reservations in Alaska. We don't have the same type of tribal law enforcement presence, so some unique aspects of it. My understanding is that the Alaska field office in Anchorage, along with the two satellite offices that we have, one in Fairbanks and one in Juneau, they have one FBI victim service coordinator to communicate with these families. This has been part of the problem. It's radio silence out of the agency. They don't know whether a case is being pursued. They hear nothing. So I would ask that you you'll look, as you're looking at your budget, to make sure that the FBI does include support for victim service coordinators on this. It's a gap that is missing right now. Very quickly, we also talked about the fentanyl crisis in Alaska. We're the one state that is tragically going the wrong way when it comes to fentanyl deaths. We had a 40% increase in fentanyl deaths in 2023. So you had indicated that you were going to be doing aggressive work here. We need to be doing more, and I've shared that it ought to be easier to intercept drugs coming into Alaska because they come by airplane, they come through the mail, and they occasionally come in by boat. Maybe a little bit driving across through the border. But we've got the ability to do the interception, and right now our numbers are not going down. I just ask for your continued commitment with this. We know we're seeing FBI partnering with ICE for arrests and detentions of immigrants in Alaska. Folks are asking me, they're saying, are we using FBI resources, redirecting them from the fentanyl crisis to perhaps pursuing those who have been targeted immigrants, even though they're not violent criminals? So I'd love to have further conversation with you on some of these Alaska specifics, but we got to start turning that corner on fentanyl.
Yes, ma'am, and I think you know this, and we're sending a plus up to Alaska in part of this movement out to the field, and we'll look to address those specific issues, and I will work with you in your office to make sure that Alaska is not forgotten and that we emphasize it.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Senator Peters.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Patel, welcome to the committee here.
Hello, sir.
Director, I've long been a supporter.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, welcome. Good to see you. I want to talk a little bit about the HHS reorganization on some of the programs that impact Alaska's most vulnerable populations. I sent you a note letting you know that just after this hearing, I'm going to be chairing a Senate Committee on Indian Affairs, specifically examining HHS tribal programs that are outside of IHS. I really thank you for your early efforts to exempt IHS healthcare providers from the RIFs. That was very important. But I've also heard concerns from tribal leaders on the impacts of RIFs to key HHS programs serving their communities. So I know you're going to have some of your folks tuning in on that, and I really appreciate that. But some of the other reductions that we're looking at within your budget do have significant consequences to a state like mine. One is the LIHEAP program, the Low Income Energy Assistance. For us, it's not a budget line item. You've been to Alaska, you know that the temperatures there can get really, really tough. Keeps people from freezing to death in their homes. Another program is NIOSH, and I know that HHS had rescinded a number of those employees. That was great news. But the employees that received RIF notices for the program were not rescinded in the NIOSH Center for Marine Safety and Health Studies. So this is a big deal for our commercial fishing safety. It could effectively leave our fishing fleet out of compliance with Coast Guard safety regs. So we're watching that very, very carefully. And then again, shared focus here on making sure that our children are as healthy as they possibly can be. So I want to look to ways that we can strengthen and not eliminate the Head Start program. But I wanted to ask you.
You're talking about the NIOSH program.
NIOSH, yeah.
You should talk to me about that.
Okay.
And, as you know, that's something that I'm deeply concerned with the commercial fishery. So we should talk about it. And let's, and let's work for a solution.
Got it. I am with you right there. Let me ask about domestic violence and sexual assault funding. Right now, I'm receiving a lot of incoming from our community-based domestic and sexual violence program operators. They're really concerned about the delayed release of FY25 funding, the absence of notices of funding opportunities, as well as proposed cuts or consolidations that might threaten the Office of Family Violence Prevention, and CDC's Division of Violence Prevention. So you've got some programs there that are really foundational to domestic and sexual violence. They've been reauthorized with bipartisan support. So I'm going to enter into the record a letter from the National Task Force, and it basically, it was sent to you, I guess, yesterday, just urging the communication of concrete plans for releasing some of these funds. So I want to raise that to your level, but I want to make sure that we're sending the right signal to so many who are just really on the edge with, again, these community-based services that are helping the most vulnerable of the most vulnerable. So we've got the funding that's out there. It's just delayed. We need help releasing that.
Yeah, my understanding is that the domestic violence funding was not cut. So I don't know. I mean, I have to go back and check, but I specifically asked about that program last night. Was told that there was no cuts, that President Trump is committed to it, and so I don't know why people would be experiencing even delays.
And it may be that it is, with the RIFs, you don't have people that are processing these things. So again, I want to get this to the top of your screen. Last question for you. I mentioned LIHEAP. The budget proposal, the skinny budget proposes to eliminate LIHEAP, and the proposal says that it's unnecessary because states have policies preventing utility disconnection for low-income households, effectively making LIHEAP a pass-through benefiting utilities in the Northeast. Further, LIHEAP rewards states like New York and California, two of the top recipients for LIHEAP funding, which have implemented anti-consumer policies. I'm just telling you, we're not in the Northeast. We're not in that bucket. We're cold. There are other places that are hot. LIHEAP is a lifesaver. I did see your statement from yesterday saying that OMB was thinking that President Trump's energy policy is going to reduce costs dramatically. It may be a while. Right now, folks in Alaska still need those ugly diesel generators to keep warm. So I
know. I was on the Navajo. First of all, I've heard that my whole life because my family was involved in providing low-cost energy to poor New England, and there are people in New England who suffer from if energy prices are high and you have a cold winter. I was on the Navajo reservation a couple of weeks ago, and Navajo President Boone Nygren said to me, if we cut LIHEAP, people will die on this reservation. I know the same is true in Alaska. The presumption behind the budget cuts were that the energy prices were going to drop dramatically, in which case these payments would just become a subsidy to the oil industry. If that doesn't happen, I would expect Congress would then still appropriate the money, and I will spend it. I've already spent $400 million between January and now on this program, and we've made sure to get it out to all the families that needed it. So
I think you're going to find a lot of support on this committee for that. Senator Murphy. Administrator, I had asked you, we had a discussion about the congressionally directed spending projects. You have indicated that indeed we've got a backlog here that we need to address. My understanding is that since fiscal year 2022, Congress had directed 2,264 CDS projects at the EPA. Only 705 have received the funding. So I think both of us would agree, we've got an issue here. There's a problem. The FY25 CR, of course, did not include the CDS projects. So I'm looking at that and saying, all right, the agency has the balance of the fiscal year to work on catching up from this backlog of the CDSs. Can you just give me a little bit of your understanding in terms of how you've directed your team to expeditiously get these projects out the door in a more timely manner?
I appreciate the question, Madam Chair. The backlog goes back years, and I've directed my team to both work with the members of Congress who represent those areas, the members of Congress who requested those earmarks, to get assistance in the case where the recipient has not been responsive, and simultaneously to try to engage as much as possible directly with the recipient to try to get the recipient to submit their paperwork. We want to completely get through the entire backlog that we inherited as quickly as possible.
Can we help you with that? I mean,
Yes.
I'm working with my constituents right now as we're moving forward in this year's appropriations and getting requests for CDSs. So can you perhaps either let me know who it is on your team that we need to be communicating directly to, if there are snags on your end, or perhaps, again, you're just not able to get in touch with the applicant?
Yeah, 100%. And as you well know, the EPA is broke down into all sorts of different program offices.
Right.
And it might not be just one person for all grants. It might depend on whether the backlog, we might be talking about a backlog inside of the Office of Water where they need assistance from the members of Congress, or maybe it's another office, maybe it's the Office of Air and Radiation. We would look forward to an opportunity to work with you and your team and all members of Congress on both sides of the aisle as much as possible to eliminate the backlog that we inherited.
Good, good. Let's do that. I think that's a good plan. Many members here have asked about different grants and programs, the pauses, the freezes. It's been particularly frustrating in Alaska when we hear that there's been a holdup in terms of the grant award. We've got just a limited construction season. It's just hard. And even if you're not choked by ice, you might have a barge that comes up with your materials for a project maybe once, maybe twice a season. And so it can push a project back not just months, but by another season, another year, perhaps multiple years. It's been hard to provide some clarity to our communities on which grants are going to be awarded, which are just going through the review process that you've shared with us, which grants have been terminated. So I'd ask if your folks could provide a list of what's actually been paused for review versus what has been terminated. I think we've heard, for instance, on the EJ grants, that one has been perhaps more clear, but there are a lot in between, and I think it would help our communities if there was more certainty as to what has actually been terminated versus what is still in the pipeline for review. So I'd ask for your help on that.
Absolutely, Madam Chair, and we will continue to be distributing funding appropriated by Congress as we go through the rest of the fiscal year. That will include funds for your great state, and we look forward to working with you on the process. As you know, when the president first came in, there was a administration-wide pause that was lifted. The pause that was then instituted for EPA was more specific to some of the Inflation Reduction Act programs. There was a clean school bus program concern that was raised early in the administration when Lion Electric and their bankruptcy issue caused some questions to be asked to make sure that the concerns with Lion Electric it was just specific to Lion Electric. And as it relates to the grants that were canceled, that's something that if you have any questions about what was included in that, we're happy to answer any individual questions.
Good. Okay. We'll work with you on that list. Senator Merkley, ranking member as well as the chairman of the committee, in talking about fisheries. I'll never disappoint you. When you come before the committee, we're going to talk about fish, and I appreciate what you have shared with Senator Collins about the administration's desire to protect our fishermen. We're pleased with the executive order relating to American seafood competitiveness. I had an opportunity just yesterday to visit with one of our seafood industry leaders in the state of Alaska. I thought we were going to be talking about some of the tax provisions that are included in the reconciliation package, but he basically said, if we can't deal with the trade issues when it comes to Alaska's seafood, we're not even going to need to worry about the tax pieces because the trade implications are going to kill us. In Alaska, Russia has declared war on Alaska seafood, and they have been very direct and very open about it. They are using their dominance in the seafood market to really help fund their war against Ukraine. And the effort is one that we are looking at and needing to make sure, I mean, really desperate to make sure that the administration fully understands the implications of what is happening right now. We've got the largest federal fisheries in the nation, about 60% of America's harvest by volume. Seafood processing is 70% of Alaska's manufacturing employment. The Alaska seafood industry generates $6 billion in economic output for the state. It employs 48,000 people in Alaska. Right now, we have Secretary of the Interior and the Secretary of Energy and the Administrator of EPA up in the state, all focused on that aspect of resource. But the other great resource for our state is our fisheries, and they are in peril. I would ask for your commitment to sit down with leaders of the Alaska seafood industry, those important stakeholders, so that we can talk about a path forward on some of these issues that are really harming our industry right now. Can you give me that commitment that we can work with your team to identify a time to do just that?
Why don't you organize it? And it would be my pleasure to come and do it together with you. We can all do it together so we can make sure every topic is on the table and we address it, because our trade policy is out to protect our fishermen, which are a key resource of the United States of America. We are on it. We know about it. I know all about the Russian issues. They've been attacking us for years. This is nothing new, sadly, but let's do it together. And this administration is on your side and is on it.
Excellent. I look forward to that, and we'll be working with you on that. A couple more issues. There's been a lot of discussion about NOAA and the budget cuts, as well as with the impact on the National Weather Service. We've been working with the Secretary of Transportation, Secretary Duffy, about aviation safety. We're going to make some headway. There's good support within the budget now to do that, but we have a connection here with the Department of Commerce in that the automated surface observing systems, the ASOS systems as they are known, which provide for the aviation safety, are managed by the National Weather Service. So right now, we're looking at about a 40% staffing shortage, and I've heard what you've said to other colleagues about, you're not cutting in key areas. I need to make sure that we are looking critically at the National Weather Service staffing in Alaska to make sure that we are not compromising in any way the systems that are vital to transportation, commerce, and safety. We need them to stay operational. So if you can just commit to me that you'll look at that.
Sounds sensible to me.
Another one that works on the safety side, and again, it ties into our extraordinary oil resources. We have to move that oil by ship out of Valdez. It has to go through Prince William Sound, and they rely on the National Data Buoy Center to manage not only the buoys there in Prince William Sound, but over 1,000 buoys that are operated by both domestic and international partners. Right now, we have a buoy, the Seal Rocks weather buoy, that's right outside of Valdez. But the tankers can't leave Valdez unless they get the wave height information from the buoy, the weather buoy that's sitting out there, right? Mm-hmm. This buoy's been out of commission for months, and we're told it's due to funding for operation and maintenance in NOAA's budget.
It's really old.
It is
needs to be
old.
replaced.
I
Oh
don't
my
care
God, if
how
I showed
old-
you what that looked like,
Let's-
you and I
no.
would hold our heads in our hands.
We all look at them, and the problem is, it's not just the buoy out there at Seal Rock. It is this system, this constellation that is designed to be the information source, the protectorate for the safety. So let's work on this. But I highlight.
Gotta modernize
I
it. We've got
highlight
to
because we've got some work to do, but it all knits together. So I've highlighted a couple of specific
Promise you're in it. We're in
instances.
it together. I promise. I
I won't
agree
make
with
you go out there if you'll commit to me that we're going to upgrade these systems. But in the meantime, we're going to get them operational so that we're not compromising safety.
Absolutely sensible.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Coons.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member. Welcome, Mr. Secretary.
Response. Senator Murkowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gentlemen, Mr. Secretary, General Kane, welcome, welcome. And I also want to recognize, General, your trip north to Alaska last week or 2 weeks ago. We appreciate that. We all know, everyone in this room knows the strategic role that Alaska plays when it comes to being on the front lines, whether it is the threat from China, Russia, Iran, North Korea. We're sitting up there. We host the backbone of our nation's missile defense there at Fort Greely, advanced fifth-generation fighters at Eielson and at JBER, critical long-range radar and surveillance systems throughout the state. We've got key airborne forces at JBER, Fort Wainwright. I mean, it's good. It's solid. We appreciate it, and we think that we're in a pretty critical place, and we think that you recognize and acknowledge that we're in a pretty critical place. And yet the FY25 Defense Budget Overview document that was released under the last administration stated that the goal of the budget request in terms of the Arctic was to, quote, develop a monitor and respond approach. I thought that that was a pretty passive approach in a highly critical region. We don't need to go into how many icebreakers we have versus Russia. The good news is that with this reconciliation bill that we're talking about, we move to make a difference in an aggressive way that is really, really important. But I will share with you that I'm a little bit frustrated where we've got stated support for the role in the Arctic region, and I'm assuming that means the U.S. Arctic region. There's a seeming fixation on Greenland that I think sends, I don't know whether it's a troubling signal or a mixed signal, that we're looking past the significance of the U.S. Arctic and the area that is already part of the United States, and happily so. But I like to remind people, everything that the administration wants in Greenland, when it comes to strategic location, when it comes to resources and minerals, we've got it on the U.S. side. So I think any serious Arctic policy has to start with a serious investment in Alaska. We've built it. We need to do more. I would just ask both you, Mr. Secretary, and General Kane, your view of the strategic importance of Alaska and more importantly, the broader Arctic, because this is really, when we're talking about DoD posturing to make sure that we're deterring adversaries in the region. I just came from a relatively uncomfortable exchange with the Army Corps of Engineers. We don't have a deep water Arctic port in the United States. Everybody says it's important, and the signal of importance that we got was a $3 million placeholder in the budget. To me, that doesn't signify significance. I'm going to stop talking to listen to both of you. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. I agree with you. It's difficult to understate the strategic significance of Alaska, whether you're looking at Indo-PACOM, whether you're looking at Russia, whether you're looking at the Arctic, whether you're looking at space-based capabilities, whether you're looking at energy. You name it, it's both a defensive posture, but also a power projection posture that is centrally a central focus of how we plan.
Senator,
First, thanks for letting me visit up there. I got a full range of academics from your colleague about Billy Mitchell and air power history.
How many times did you hear that?
Ma'am, only a few.
Okay.
But, as the Secretary said, the northern flank is critical, and it's in the right place on the globe for us to be able to do a lot of things from that power projection platform. And so as the department considers through the Secretary force a rail, I know it will be high on our radar.
Well, I appreciate that and appreciate the continued focus. There's a lot of focus on the Indo-PACOM, should be, but just remember, we sit right on top of it. We're connected, we're part of that.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm running out of time. I have been concerned. We have E3 capability up north, of course, but we were all counting on the E7 wedge tail coming our way. We're kind of limping along up north right now, which is unfortunate. And the budget proposes terminating the program. Again, the E3 fleet barely operational now, and I understand the intent to shift towards the space-based, you call it the air-moving target indicators. But my concern is that you've got a situation where you're not going to be able to use more duct tape to hold things together until you put this system in place. And so how we maintain that level of operational readiness and coverage, I'm not sure how you make it. General Kane?
Well, ma'am, thank you for the question. The E3 and the E3 community have been really important to us for a long, long time. And I'll defer to the comptroller, but the department has a bridging strategy through investing in some additional airborne platforms in order to gap fill while the space-based capabilities come online.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Ma'am, we do have in the budget $150 million in FY26 for a joint expeditionary E2D unit with 5 dedicated E2Ds, and the budget also funds 4 additional E2Ds to fill the near-term gap at $1.4 billion.
And can you tell me how that will that have implications for what we're seeing up north in Alaska?
I would defer to the Secretary and the Chairman on that question, ma'am.
The answer is yes. I would file this entire discussion under difficult choices that we have to make. But the E7 in particular be sort of late, more expensive and gold-plated, and so filling the gap and then shifting to space-based ISR is a portion of how we think we can do it best, considering all the challenges.
Well, I appreciate the indulgence of the chair. My time is well over. If I can get, if your teams can come back with us to just give us a little bit of a walkthrough in terms of what we can be expecting in this space, I would appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you both.
We will.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Senator Murkowski. Members of the subcommittee will have a week to get questions in for the record, and we'd request witnesses to respond within.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Attorney General Bondi, welcome. Welcome to the committee. Good to see you. When we visited prior to your confirmation, we had, I think, a really good discussion about some of the statistics that, unfortunately, we have held the #1 place for far too long in areas that we really don't like in terms of the increased number of deaths due to fentanyl between 22 and 23, an increase by over 40% when other states around the country were seeing that go down. We're doing a little bit better, not enough, because 1 death due to fentanyl is 1 death too many, as we would all agree. But also when it comes to violent crime, it's stunning for many people to hear a senator like me say that Alaska's violent crime rate was more than 540% of the national average in 2023. It's like stunning, just stunning, right? And so I think we had good conversation about that, what you could do in your position to help prioritize combating violent crime. I'm going to channel a little bit of Alaskans' conversations. We don't have much of an ICE presence in Alaska. We just haven't. We had 2 Russians seeking asylum a couple years ago when the war in Ukraine broke out. ICE didn't know what to do with them because we just didn't have a presence here. And all of a sudden, we're now on the map. We have those that are being detained in our local jail that were flown up to the state several weeks ago to be detained up there. So there's a lot of chatter about what is going on. And what I'm hearing, the fear that I am hearing, and I'd like you to just put to rest some of the concerns that Alaskans are having. They're worried that immigration enforcement is being prioritized over combating violent crime. And they're worried as they're seeing FBI and DEA coming in, assisting ICE in immigration enforcement. Again, many of the stories that we're hearing, it's not necessarily criminals that they are making the news. It's one individual who has been a restaurant owner down in Soldotna for the past 20 years, and his children are all integrated into the community. You've heard these stories many, many, many times. So I need to know, for Alaskans' sake, the response as to whether or not immigration enforcement is being prioritized over combating violent crime, and whether increased resources, whether it's staff or funding, are being sent to the state to help us cover the added workload. So that's my question. You've got a runway of about 2 minutes here to help me out.
Thank you, Senator. I learned more about Alaska from you in our meeting prior to my confirmation hearing than I ever knew, and we have talked about it.
And you're still invited to come up and see for yourself.
We have a trip planned, and we have some information for you on that trip, and that also we wanted to talk about the missing and murdered Indigenous people and the tribal resource response plans. Right. We wanted to visit some of those areas in a different setting. We can give you more details on that. Good. But we have 2 dates or 3 we'd like to run by you if that works, and 2 locations we'd like to go to. But yes, we've added 2 FBI agents in Alaska. We're adding more. Director Patel and I have talked about Alaska at great length. He met with you about Alaska as well, and what we can do. I'm going to try to talk fast. We have criminally charged 39 defendants over the last 4 months under Operation Take Back America, nationwide, though, to receive to eliminate the cartels and transnational gangs. And the District of Alaska, has already, we have charged 39, I don't know if you knew that, 39 criminal defendants just in Alaska under Take Back America, more throughout the country. But we're going to continue to fight. Your demographic is so unusual, and the hours of darkness and the temperatures and your lack of resources and your tribal population that we are working. I have also spoken to our new Gadi Saralta, who will be our new U.S. Marshal, about getting you additional resources in Alaska. I've spoken to Gadi at length about that as well, and as soon as he is in place in office, we want to sit down and meet with you about that.
Well, I appreciate all that, and I'm looking forward to the opportunity for you to come to the state. So I am hearing you saying that you are committing more resources to this effort, which we're very thankful for, and as you have heard very clearly, we desperately needed, given the statistics as they relate to violent crime and of course, fentanyl. And so the specific ask is whether or not immigration enforcement is being prioritized over combating violent crime. And I just want to know that we're not taking the eye off the ball there.
And Senator, before you walked in, I think senators on both sides of the aisle shared that same concern, and it is not and it will not. A lot of it does go hand in hand, though, getting the illegal aliens who are violent criminals out of our country, but it will not. And I believe we've also seized 4.5, I think this is right, kilos of fentanyl since January in Alaska. But we will not forget about Alaska. We will prioritize Alaska and do everything we can to increase resources to help you and the citizens of your state.
Very good, and thank you. And I will be following up with a phone call regarding a NOFA for the delay in the release of some OVC tribal set-aside. So you've given us all encouragement to give you a call, and know that we'll be
Please.
doing that with regards to Mountain Village.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Murkowski.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And Administrator Vogt, thank you for being here today to answer our questions, whether it's on the specifics of this rescission package to where this all might be headed with the Impoundment Control Act. You know, I think probably to a number, every one of us is supportive of PEPFAR and the intent of that program. I think we all recognize that most of everything we do around here isn't entirely perfect, and we try to do as good as we can and improve it every single opportunity that we have. I'm going to ask you some questions with regards to Corporation for Public Broadcasting, but just kind of from a more general perspective, it's absolutely the administration's right to send us rescissions. It's our right as a Congress to then figure out whether or not we're going to support them. But I am going to strongly push back against my colleague here on this side of the aisle, Senator Kennedy, in his comments, basically saying that all we have anymore when it comes to appropriations are CRs, which are a miserable option, and rescissions. I refuse that. I reject that. And I think that not only we as appropriators on this committee should reject that, but we as members of the Senate, members of the Congress, should reject that. It's pretty clear in Article 1 what it is that we're supposed to be doing when it comes to the power of the purse, appropriations. We have a responsibility, and Administrator, you have aptly pointed out that maybe in some of these areas we have failed because I think many of the initiatives that you have specifically cited to our constituents would probably say that's not what was intended. But this is our role here in the Congress and as appropriators to again assert our role and our responsibility. I don't object to the fact that you have come to this hearing today to present your review. That's absolutely fair and legitimate. But I want us as senators, I want us as members of the legislative branch to make sure that we are being faithful and have fidelity to our requirements under the Constitution as well. So I want to ask about public broadcasting in the time that I have here. You have said that, and it's more specific to NPR, I think, but you said that basically it's all political. I am going to give you a little bit of a bird's eye view of what I consider to be not political when it comes to the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and the role that they play in my state. I've got kind of a memo here from Coast Alaska, which is our Alaska Public Media, outlining the various public media stations around the state of Alaska. I'd like the permission that they be included as part of the record.
Without objection.
But there's 22 different stations that are listed here, and they're everywhere from 24% of their annual budget to 70% in Sandpoint, in communities that are relatively small but have extraordinary reach. In Barrow, the station up there covers some 95,000 miles. When the fiber optic cable was severed by ice about 6 or 7 months ago, that has still not been repaired. It's public broadcasting that is beaming out to the 8 communities out there to keep those people connected. Right now, we've got wildfires that are raging in the interior part of the state, and so at Fort Yukon and McGrath, it is just our public radio stations that are providing the updates to get people into safe areas. Senator Rounds mentioned the very important role that we see with regards to our tribes. We have more than 60 tribal stations that is served out of KNBA that would be disproportionately impacted, where they offer emergency alerts, vital community connections. So I'm going through their concerns, because almost to a number, they're saying that they will go under if public broadcasting funds are no longer available to them. And you've indicated that, well, they're going to have time to readjust their budget, because it's not going to be this fiscal year, that's going to be impacted. When you have a community like Sandpoint out in the Aleutian Islands, where 70% of their budget comes from public broadcasting, or in let's just say Wrangell, because I'm going to be going there in a few days, 50% of their budget comes from public broadcasting. There's no way to recalibrate. There is no safety valve for them. So, Administrator, I've run out of time to ask my question, but I hope you feel the urgency that I'm trying to express on behalf of the people in rural Alaska, and I think in many parts of rural America, where this is their lifeline. This is where they get the updates on that landslide. This is where they get the updates on the wildfires that are coming their way. And so how they will be able to not only get the emergency alerts that they need, but also the weather reporting to make sure that that fisherman out in Unalaska can go out safely, so that these communities can be connected when the deadly landslide has come through. I know Senator Rounds has asked for specific help with regards to the tribes, but mine is much bigger, and I think we're not necessarily alone. We're just a little more extreme in the ask.
Senator, thanks for the comment, and we'll definitely work with you throughout the process if it's not in this, in the fiscal year 26. I think we're to the point, for decades we've had concerns with the extent to which public broadcasting was funding content that was run contrary to the American people, and we've got to get to the point where we can finally deal with that. And we believe we put forward a proposal that gives a run rate to be able to deal with that. But I certainly want to work with you throughout the various opportunities that we have moving forward.
Senator Peters.
Recognized.
I know we are approaching the hour that was planned for the vote on this motion to discharge this rescission package. I just want to take a couple minutes. I'm going to be voting to oppose discharging this package from committee. It is not that I don't think that we should be doing more when it comes to oversight of our budget. It's not that I don't think that we should be doing more when it comes to ensuring that we're working to get our levels of spending down. But I also think that we need to be doing more as legislators, more as lawmakers, more as senators when it comes to our own authorities, our constitutional authorities, when it comes to the power of the purse. We do rescissions. We do rescissions in our annual budget bills, in our own appropriations bills, in fact, bills that we are working on right now as appropriators. We've got a series of markups that are going to be coming up this week. We had some last week. We do this. We look to provisions that have been included in the budgets. We look to reprogram. We look to rescind. We do that as legislators. There's a good reason, I think, that we haven't seen a successful rescissions package before the Senate in almost 33 years. It's because we've recognized that, hey, that's our role here. That is our role here when it comes to the power of the purse. And so I have several concerns, specific concerns about this package. First, it's unclear to me how the specific accounts that are targeted for the rescission are going to be impacted. Neither the administration nor others have been able to provide that very clear, very transparent explanation about the programs and the priorities that are going to be cut as a result of the measure. Some changes have been proposed to protect global health programs. That's great. That's important. But I think it's important that we have those details, including the ones that are going to be absolutely zeroed out. And so how do we determine the implications for life-saving care, vital resources for women and children abroad? We've got big, broad categories, but I haven't been given the comfort, if you will, that we're not impacting maternal and child health, that we're not impacting HIV/AIDS, that we're not impacting nutrition programs and programs related to tuberculosis, malaria, polio, neglected tropical disease, pandemic prevention, family planning. I think that we are entitled to have that level of detail when these funds that we have authorized, that we have appropriated to, are now being clawed back. I don't think that that is too much to ask. When it comes to the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, my colleagues know I've been a strong supporter. I will continue to be a strong supporter. Where if you don't like what's going on within NPR, you think that there's too much bias there, we can address that. We can address that, but you don't need to gut the entire Corporation for Public Broadcasting. The entity, the program that provides for so much support, particularly for those in rural places. It's not just your news, it's your tsunami alerts, it is your landslide alert, it is your volcano alert, it is the weather to let you know it's safe to go out and get on the fishing grounds, it's your educational programming. I am going to continue to be an advocate for the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. So I've got concerns about the contents of the package, yes. I've got concerns about the details that we have not been able to fully receive, but more important than all of that, more important is our role here. I don't want us to go from one reconciliation bill to a rescissions package, to another rescissions package, to a reconciliation package, to a continuing resolution. We're lawmakers. We should be legislating. What we're getting now is a direction from the White House and being told, this is the priority. We want you to execute on it. We'll be back with you with another round. I don't accept that. I'm going to be voting no. Mr. President, I've got a news alert. This afternoon, we had a 7.3 earthquake off of the coast of Alaska. It's pretty big. We got the alert from KUCB staff members who felt this earthquake out there in Unalaska. They contacted the emergency responders. It was an all hands on deck. I'm looking at a text that I received from the station manager there at KUCB. 3 staff members worked at sea level in our studio to get emergency messages on the air in coordination with local public safety officials. A 4th employee worked remotely to update the web and social media. When the tsunami sirens started to blare, the voice message in the warning instructed community members to tune in to the local radio. We provided up-to-date information throughout the entire evacuation and all clear procedures. So the good news is tsunami is all clear, but they say this is the work that we do to keep Unalaska safe, and it's only possible with federal funding. Mr. President, I have an amendment that protects public media, their independence, their ability to provide local news, weather reports, and yes, emergency alerts. What we do in this amendment is we tweak the rescission for the Corporation for Public Broadcasting to protect public broadcasting while removing the pot of money that can go directly to NPR. We're reminded today this stuff matters. So I would hope my colleagues would recognize what is at stake and vote for my amendment.
Chair recognizes Senator from Missouri.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise in objection to the amendment from my colleague from Alaska. As was mentioned earlier on several of these other Corporation for Public Broadcasting amendments, this rescission does nothing to affect FEMA, which actually does the emergency response system. So our hearts, I know that's a scary situation in Alaska, but the good news is FEMA money will be there for these sort of alerts. We've come a long way tonight. We're almost there. Our efforts to finally prevent federal funding for the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. This is maybe one of the last votes for that. And what's important to note here is this would gut that aspect of it. 93% of the work that we're trying to do would be eliminated here. So this would effectively fully fund the Corporation of Public Broadcasting to the tune of 93% of what we currently are trying to rescind. So this is a very important vote, and I would ask my colleagues to vote no.
Thank you both for being here to testify this afternoon. I think it was you, Dr. Menares, you made the comment in your testimony that this is about the future of the trust in public health. And I really feel that's where we are today. There's been a lot of, I don't want to call it he said, she said, back and forth, but there's been a lot that folks have tried to drill down on exactly your comments and exactly Secretary Kennedy's. And you also made the point that this is not about you. It's about trust in our public health institutions, because that's what I'm worried most about. I don't know you other than the few times that we've had an opportunity to visit. I've just met you, Dr. Hurry. I'm sure you're both good women, working hard, doing good things for others. But really, this is about trust in our institutions, and this is where I feel we are really, really vulnerable right now. We've all been back and forth with these votes, and so I don't want to try to ask many of the same questions that have been asked. But we have a structure within the CDC that is your career public health officials. They provide the institutional knowledge, the scientific expertise, and very often continuity between administrations. I think, Dr. Hurry, you said you had worked across 6 different administrations, or
4 administrations, 6 directors.
so, I mean, you provide some level of continuity, that bridge between the political leadership that comes in and then the agency's scientific mission. And I hope, and correct me if I'm wrong, that you seek to ensure that the policy decisions are grounded in public health expertise while also meeting the goals of the administration. So, Dr. Menares, when you said yes to President Trump, when you said yes to Secretary Kennedy, you were also signing on to the goals of the administration here. I'm concerned that when career scientists then are excluded, maybe completely excluded from the director's office, what happens? Who does then provide the scientific expertise, this institutional memory that is needed to guide the agencies? I think we've heard from both of you that there was very little interaction between you, Dr. Menares, and the Secretary. And Dr. Hurry, I think you have also testified that those who would ordinarily brief the Secretary have not been present, but also to the point that was just made about the work groups, that no work groups other than the COVID working group were basically assigned to this upcoming ACIP meeting. Is that correct? So what happens then to this scientific mission when there are none of the career public health professionals that are in these positions to advise on the policy, to protect the scientific integrity, and really to ensure some level of continuity of operations when you're moving through a transition like this? Dr. Hurry?
So I think continuity is important. I certainly think openness to change and supporting the administration's priorities are important. I was selected to be the transition lead for the agency because I was known as somebody that could embrace both administrations and help implement policies. That was my goal. I'm the last, or I was the last career left in the office of the director. I have no doubt that my role will be replaced by a political.
May I stop you there? You're the last career. So then are you saying that everyone that is remaining
in the
is
office of the director is a political? Yes.
Is a political. And so there is nobody then that is, there must be somebody that is providing that career science then?
A level down, we do have center directors, although 80% are now acting because they've been fired, resigned, or retired.
Dr. Menares, were you ever directed to not speak to career officials? Was that a directive that you received?
That was.
And when was that? When were you directed to not speak to career officials?
Yeah, that transpired over the course of August 25th in the engagements with Secretary Kennedy, and that I was directed to only work with the political appointees that he had put in place at CDC, and not to speak or work with career scientists.
Well, my time has expired, and I will turn. Scott. Madam President, are we in a quorum call?
We are not.
Madam President, we are in day 27 of a government shutdown. 27 days where the government is shut down. And yet we're here, you're presiding, we have pages on the floor, there are people in the gallery, there are people coming and going. We've got Capitol Hill police that are in the area, and it just kind of feels like business as usual. We're going to have committee hearings this week. We're going to be voting on judges and some CRAs, and it just kind of feels like business as usual. And yet it is so not business as usual. We're pretending that everything is okay. We're pretending that people are not being impacted by this shutdown. I'm looking at the people that are here recording this, that will be working to process this vote. None of them are getting paid. The Capitol Hill police that I visit with on a daily basis, outside and inside, are not getting paid, and they share with me that, well, I still had to drive in. I've got a 40-minute drive to get here, so I've got to fill up my car. I have kids at home that are young kids, and so they go to child care. This is the Capitol Hill police officer saying, and he says, and so I still have to pay the child care provider, even though I have to come in and I'm not getting work, so my expenses are not going away. And yet every single one of them says, I'm not complaining. I'm not complaining. I've signed up for this. This is my mission, and I will be here. And they're proud to be here. But what is wrong is that their families are stressed. I was talking with one Capitol Hill police officer on Thursday of last week, and he says, every day I go home and my wife says, so did they open it up? Are we going to be paid? And he said, and I tell her, nope, no progress today. And so we're starting to feel that, because people who would otherwise just be saying, I signed up for this, I'm not going to complain, I'm just going to do what I'm going to do. But we're starting to feel this in real time. And it's having an impact not only financially, but I fear from a mental health perspective. We had a call come in actually today. And this is a person who was calling from Fairbanks, and she says, it's getting chilly in Fairbanks. I woke up to a bill for heating oil of nearly $2,500. Normally, this wouldn't be that big of a problem for me, but I'm a federal employee. I love my job, but it's been very frustrating to have constant threats of shutdowns and rifts looming over my head. I work hard. I'm so tired of being labeled as one who's not working hard. I'd first like to propose that Congress doesn't get paid while we aren't getting paid, and maybe take fewer long weekends. Well, I would let her know that for many of us, I don't know about the occupant of the chair, but for many of us, we have deferred our pay. It's not right that our staffs should not get paid, and yet we get paid. But she raises a good point. She says, maybe we in Congress should take fewer long weekends. I think she's right. I think she's right. We left here Thursday afternoon. Members are just now coming back. We'll have our first vote here at 5:30. And in the meantime, people have done important stuff. We have important jobs. We go home. We do important things. And maybe we are able to carve out a little time to be with our families as well and try to have some of that balance. But for some, they still had to come in this weekend. Some of those Capitol Hill police officers still had to come in this weekend to keep this place moving. Some of the folks who are here to provide services to the building still had to come in this weekend, and they weren't getting paid. And so I think the suggestion about us maybe taking fewer long weekends is something not only that we should consider, but I'm going to challenge this body. I got a long commute home, folks. And I'm not begrudging that, but I don't think that we should be going home and just behaving as if this was another week in the United States Senate. Not when we have a government shutdown. There is so much that is coming at us like a freight train. Little kids are excited because Friday is going to be Halloween. Well, let me tell you, the scary costumes on Halloween night are not going to be the scariest things. It's going to be what is delivered, what's left on the doorstep the next morning, November 1st. When it then becomes officially official, SNAP payments will not be processed, will not be available for the many, 66,000 in Alaska who rely on those food benefits. The WIC payments to the women, infants, and children's, those too will be impacted. It is a reality for us that we are seeing an impact across our society in ways that are not only scary, but overwhelming for some. We had a pretty tough week and a half with a major disaster. Thank you to the President for declaring that presidential disaster following ex-Typhoon Halong. But I can tell you that those who are reliant on SNAP benefits are increasingly stressed because of what they have just gone through with displacement within their homes. And now it's across the whole state. And our food banks are stressed. We were stressed going into the beginning of winter already. We keep in close touch with our food banks. But what I'm hearing is that we are already seeing the lines at the food bank growing longer. And what is hard to see is to know how many military families are part of those lines now. Madam President, this is simply not right. Now, we may or may not have what we call rifle shot votes this week that will. Maybe we will take up again the bill that would pay all the federal workers. Maybe there will be a way that the military, who has been paid up until the end of this month, that we will be able to make that next pay increment. I certainly hope so. And not just our military, but our U.S. Coast Guard and those that are in law enforcement. Maybe there's going to be a vote that would allow us to pay our U.S. Capitol Police. I've signed on to that bipartisan measure. Maybe there's going to be a vote for us to to pay out the SNAP benefits. I've signed on to that legislation as well. Maybe, but maybe not. And again, if we do take the rifle shot approach, who else are we leaving behind? What have we done for the men and women who are making sure that when we go through those airports, you've gone through the TSA, what have we done to make sure that our air traffic controllers that are keeping us safe in the skies, that their wives aren't yelling at them at the end of a long, stressful day and saying, when is this going to end? So we have got to figure this out. And I know that we have our positions. And if people don't know what the Republican positions are and the Democrat positions are, they haven't been listening to this discussion for the past 27 days. We know what it is. We have got to come together, which means we've got to talk to one another. And it can't be about Republicans winning and Democrats losing, or Democrats winning and Republicans losing, because right now, those that are losing are the American people. Those who are calling us up and saying, Social Security hasn't released her survivor's benefits after her husband's death. The inquiry is placed on hold. Sorry, you're just going to have to wait. A fellow in Petersburg was told that his telehealth appointment with his cardiologist was canceled because of the lapse in authorization of telehealth benefits. And so they basically said, if you want to keep this appointment, you're going to have to fly to Seattle. Those of you that know Alaska know that Petersburg and Seattle are not connected by a road, and it's not cheap. A couple in Anchorage said that they've been waiting on an approval from the FDA on a compassionate use exception for a medication to treat stage 4 ovarian cancer. And now they're told, just hold on, government's not operational right now. We have a lot in our maritime community, and in order for them to be lawfully out on the water, they need to have license renewed through the new merchant mariner credentialing. That's on hold. We've got a housing situation in Sitka, and we've got an Army Corps permit for the Housing Authority that has been delayed. We can't figure that one out. We're talking to people who have been trying to get an SBA loan, a local business owner in downtown, the school district in Sleep Mute. They've been waiting to get the impact aid emergency construction dollars so that they can repair this roof that is literally falling down on top of the kids in the back of the school there. And, they're told, well, there's nobody here to take your call. There's nobody here to take your call because the government is not open. So for those who think that this is not that big of a deal, they need to start asking people, not only people who are federal employees, not only people who are SNAP recipients. They need to be asking people about just some of the day-to-day matter-of-fact things that happen when you have a small business or you're trying to get your fishing vessel out in the water. Real Alaskans are being impacted, and real Alabamians are being impacted. Americans are being impacted when we don't do our job. And maybe this idea of we don't go home this weekend until we resolve this, maybe it doesn't work. Maybe we just look at one another and say, I'm not even going to talk to you. Maybe we just continue on with multiple rounds of the same vote that we've been taking for the past 27 days and see if we get a different result. Now, some say that's the definition of insanity. I don't know. But what I do know is that when we leave and we assume that things are fine, or we send that message that things are fine because we've just gone home and it's just business as usual here, then people whose lives are really being impacted right now, they think we don't get it. We do get it. We need to act to end the shutdown. And I'm going to call on all of my colleagues to stay here until we get it done. And with that, Madam President, I yield the floor. Mr. President.
The senator from Alaska.
Are we in a quorum call?
We are not.
Mr. President, I've come to the floor to join my colleague from Alaska, Senator Sullivan, in support of Senate Joint Resolution 80. As Senator Sullivan explained earlier, this resolution will disapprove the integrated activity plan the Biden administration issued back in 2022 to manage the National Petroleum Reserve in Northwest Alaska. He sponsored it, I've co-sponsored it, because the Biden administration imposed this management plan over not only our objections, but the objection of leaders from across Alaska's North Slope. The third member of our delegation, Congressman Begich, has introduced House Joint Resolution 124, which is identical and is pending in the House of Representatives. I think it's important to outline a little bit of the history on this issue. I don't want to go into all of it, but the National Petroleum Reserve in Alaska, we call it NPRA, is a 23 million acre tract of land. It's roughly the size of the state of Indiana. It was specifically designated for responsible energy development. The Petroleum Reserve dates back a century to President Harding's withdrawal and initial control by the U.S. Navy. Now, more recently, Congress has come to understand not only the naval value, but the national value of the area. They've directed the Department of Interior to conduct an expeditious program of competitive leasing of oil and gas in the reserve to help boost our energy security. And what I've just shared there is a word-for-word requirement from existing federal law. So this is what is in law, to conduct an expeditious program of competitive leasing of oil and gas in the reserve. The department is mandated to do that while protecting important values, including sensitive areas, as well as providing for subsistence use for Alaskans. This is generally Alaska Natives who live in the North Slope area. Congress really envisioned this as a balance here, where you had responsible exploration and development moving in tandem with strong environmental protection and subsistence rights. And the statute is pretty clear. It kind of spells it out. And we're okay with that. We don't have a problem with that. That's kind of the Alaska way. But unfortunately, the Biden administration ignored that. Instead of providing for balanced management, the last administration ignored what I think was a good plan that was already in place. They ignored federal law. They ignored the congressional delegation. They ignored the people who live on the North Slope. And I think that they also ignored or overlooked our history of responsible production, our energy security, and they instead prioritized conservation over everything else. And so that's why we're here. The 2022 Integrated Activity Plan cut off access, to cut off leasing, to cut off development in our petroleum reserve. And that was not an accident. That was the goal here. That was the intent. The 2022 plan they admit that it will reduce oil and gas activity, which was fine in the eyes of the Biden administration because right as they were putting sanctions on Alaska, they were taking them off of places like Iran and Venezuela to free up those nations to produce more. So let me reiterate how the Biden administration went about doing this. The 2022 plan replaced the 2020 plan, which is put in place after an environmental review process that featured public comment and significant consultation with communities and leaders on the North Slope. And under that 2020 plan, the BLM concluded that 18.6 million acres, this was 82% of the NPRA, should be open for potential leasing. But in the 2022 plan, just 11.8 million acres, 52% of the petroleum reserve, were left open for that purpose. Under the 2020 plan, 4.3 million acres were closed to new infrastructure with no development across millions of additional acres subject to requirements for no surface occupancy, seasonal timing, other sensible protections. But then the 2022 plan rejected that, closing off 8.3 million acres to any new infrastructure. The 2020 plan was well received by most Alaskans because it was viewed as balanced. BLM crafted a plan that was, as the agency wrote at the time, quote, suitably specific for broad-scale management decisions. Additional site-specific analysis will occur when BLM receives an application to approve an action on the ground. This will be done through subsequent NEPA reviews and analysis, which will be conducted before BLM issues permits or approvals for any ground disturbing activity. So in other words, what you had was a high-level management framework. No individual projects were approved. Any seeking to advance were still going to have to go through a separate permitting process before being allowed to do so. But unfortunately, BLM abandoned that approach after the Biden administration took office, and they didn't base their 2022 plan on any new scientific analysis or new environmental review process. They based it on a political agenda and their preference to what they called keep it in the ground. And they issued a determination of NEPA adequacy and then went into the 2020 plan and selected a far more restrictive alternative from it. So with virtually no public process, no public comment, no consultation with Alaska Natives who call the North Slope home, the Biden administration unilaterally cut off access to 6.8 million acres of our petroleum reserve. That's an area that's larger than the individual states of Maryland, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Hawaii. It's clearly not what the delegation wanted. It's not what most Alaskans wanted. And as I explained when discussing the administrative withdrawals in the Central Yukon Plan just a few weeks back, it violates multiple Alaska-specific statutes. And I should add that this was just one plank in the Biden administration's plan to shut down development in our petroleum reserve. So in addition to cutting off access, they refused to hold a single lease sale in the NPRA during their time in office. They dragged the Willow Project through years of additional process, sending a signal that nobody else should dare try to develop there. They issued a management rule that turned the law on its head by establishing a presumption against new development. And they initiated another process to expand and designate new special areas where no development would be allowed to occur. And then just a few days before leaving office, an acting deputy secretary issued a memo with interim management measures to further tilt the balance away from any potential development. So what you had was an administration that wanted nothing to do with responsible development in Alaska's petroleum reserve. And that was enough to cause some whiplash for those of us who not only know the law, but also remember the Obama-Biden administration repeatedly urging companies, go over there, go to the National Petroleum Reserve. This was the big fight over ANWR, and they said, don't go to ANWR, go to NPRA. So I've kind of outlined the history of this, some of the politics of it, but I would suggest that folks just shouldn't take the delegation's word for it either. We received a letter from the North Slope Trilateral. This is the political leadership on the North Slope, consisting of the North Slope Borough, the Inupiat community of the Arctic Slope, and the Arctic Slope Regional Corporation. And they weighed in with their strong support for this disapproval resolution. And in their words, and I'm quoting here, the NPRA lies entirely within the homelands of the North Slope Inupiat. Congress established the NPRA with a clear purpose: to ensure energy security for the nation while respecting the needs of Alaska Natives. Despite that, the 2022 plan imposed sweeping restrictions that curtail responsible development, undermine congressional intent, and disregard the well-being of the people who depend on these lands for both subsistence and livelihoods. And the letter then goes on to explain how the impacts of the 2022 plan are especially severe for the North Slope. Oil and gas development in the NPRA funds the borough's schools, emergency services, and infrastructure. It supports jobs for Inupiaq shareholders and residents. It underwrites the continuation of our communities even as we maintain our subsistence way of life. By arbitrarily locking away vast portions of the NPRA, BLM's rule threatens these essential services and imposes disproportionate burdens on our people. It's equally concerning, BLM failed to engage in meaningful government-to-government consultation with ASRC, the borough, and ICAS. This omission contradicts federal consultation requirements and disregards the voices of the very communities most affected. Our leadership has consistently raised concerns about this process and its outcomes, yet those concerns were ignored. So I think the words from the North Slope Trilateral are particularly strong and powerful, and I thank them for their leadership on the issues. Mr. President, I would ask unanimous consent that the full text of their letter be added to the congressional record immediately following my remarks.
Without objection.
Mr. President, there's a good chance you will see Senator Sullivan and me here on the floor of the Senate seeking to disapprove any administrative action that unreasonably restricts access to public land in our home state. That's exactly what happened in this 2022 plan. Like we saw so much in the Biden administration, it lacked balance and it failed to adhere to the law. We feel pretty strongly back home that we don't need Washington, D.C. to try to protect Alaska from Alaskans. We need Washington, D.C. to understand that no one cares more about Alaska, our lands, the people, than those who live there. And that what we're seeking is to partner with those on balanced management of our lands. And that's true across our state, and that's true within the NPRA. We had a good framework for responsible development in our petroleum reserve back in 2020. Today, we can vote to nullify the 2022 replacement and go back to it. So I would urge my colleagues, when we have this measure before us tomorrow for final, I would urge support for the resolution. Mr. President, I yield the floor. Mr. President, I know that we're getting ready to wrap the day here on this Saturday, and I just wanted to take just a couple minutes. I really don't feel like I'm speaking as the senator for Alaska. I feel like at this moment, I want to be the senator speaking for the men and women who allow this place to happen on a weekday, but also on a weekend. There's a lot of really great people who come in day over day over day to either protect the Capitol, to clean the Capitol, to help make sure that our operations are efficient and expedient to the extent that we can be. They keep the wheels on the bus, if you will. And along with all of our other federal employees and so many that are being impacted by this shutdown, they haven't been paid since the 1st of October, since the shutdown began. And the pressure points are real. I spent a lot of time talking to these people because they're the ones that are making things happen here. And we're here on a weekend, and I'm glad Mr. President, I'm glad we're here this weekend. I didn't want to be here last weekend, but I said, until the government is open, we should be here doing our jobs. And so I'm glad that we're here. But I also recognize that this is not business as usual. This is not ordinary times. This is a Saturday. It's a beautiful day in Washington, D.C. right now. And we have asked those who are our stenographers, those who are doing the photocopying, those who are outside guarding the doors to this entrance, we have asked everybody to be here. We've asked everybody to be here. The Capitol building, the doors that are open this weekend, almost identical to what we would be doing on a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. The doorkeepers who are outside, same schedule as usual. The employee assistance program, same schedule as usual. The food services, a little bit pared down, but outside of some different hours, schedule as usual. The ID office. Do we really need to have the people who work at the Senate ID office here on a Saturday and a Sunday? The media galleries, the parking operations, the photographic services. Do we really need to have the Senate photographers coming in? Those people who have kids who they don't get to see during the week, we're now asking them to come in, be on standby here during the weekend, drive 45 minutes to come in. Printing and graphics, we need charts. Well, those folks are all still here at the Senate Post Office, Senate Recording Studio. Mr. President, I care about the people who allow our operations to function, and I don't want us to grind them down. And so I'm asking that our Sergeant at Arms, along with those who have the oversight, it's the Senate Committee on Rules and Administration, I'm asking them to take a look at this list and to make sure that we are treating the people who stand by us with the degree of respect that they deserve during a really difficult time. We need to get the shutdown over, behind us yesterday, but in the meantime, let's think about those who are here. And with that, Mr. President, I yield the floor.
You have a full